with Saddleback Educational Publishing. Welcome to our webinar, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. With me this week is Jill Haney. She's our Director of Literacy, and we're going to take some time today to share with you an exciting new Saddleback resource. As you're logging in, please locate your control bar, which is at the bottom of your web browser window. That is where you can chat with us. One thing to remember about the chat is that you do need to select everyone from the dropdown. So we invite you actually right now, go to the chat, select everyone, and then just let us know where you are joining us from today. And then we have the Q&A. So any questions that happen to pop into your mind as we are talking today and giving you the details of this new resource, go ahead and put them in the Q&A area, and we will answer those questions as we can. If you'd like to take advantage of subtitles, go ahead and click on Live Transcript and then select Show Subtitles. All right, we are on Twitter. This is how you can find us. Please follow us. Let everybody know you are joining us today to learn about our new Go SEL Tween Literacy Library. We have Tracy and Robert and Sylvia. Welcome, welcome, welcome. As you are logging in, please go ahead and go to the chat, choose everyone from the dropdown, and then let us know where you're joining us from. Hi, Jill. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you doing today, Liz? We have quite a diversity of places that folks are from this morning or this afternoon now, isn't it? So
yeah, we have a lot of our regulars joining us today, so that always makes me happy that you take some time to kind of learn about a Saddleback product. So Jill, it's been a while since we've had you on, so why don't you remind everybody where you are joining us from today?
So I live in Longmont, Colorado, which is about an hour or so north of Denver, and we had pretty uneventful, dry kind of end of 2021, and then ever since then there's been lots of snow. So we've had a good amount of snowstorms, and we are seeing some great skiing in Colorado right now. So
yeah, I was just going to ask about skiing or snowboarding. Have anybody in the family or friend circle who's into skiing or snowboarding?
You know, we are personally not, but certainly there are a ton of skiers and snowboarders here in Colorado. We just moved here about 2 years ago, and have really enjoyed the environment and everything around here. The mountains are gorgeous, but it's also been that time these last 2 years of the pandemic and kind of staying close to home. So I'm looking forward to exploring more of Colorado as these next few months unfold. It's looking like we may start to see some return to normality. I guess we'll have to see, won't we?
I hope so. I hope so. You know what? I'm not one for winter sports at all. So you won't find me snowboarding or skiing. Maybe building a snowman. But that's about all I can do.
Although
Hi,
you
Emily.
grew up
welcome.
in snow country, Liz.
Yeah, and I'm over it. I was over it by age 20. So that's why I live in Texas. Okay, thanks everybody for joining today. We don't want to take up too much of your time, so let's go ahead and get started. Our topic today is, of course, we're here to introduce you to our new Go SEL Literacy Library. You will also hear me refer to this as the Go SEL Tween Literacy Library, and that is because this is a resource that was developed for tweens, and by that we mean students in grades 4 through 8. These are books that we created to help tweens master social and emotional skills. Now, Jill and I are going to kind of be going back and forth today, talking about this product and sharing the details with you. And just feel free to jump into the chat or into the Q&A with any comments or questions. So I want to start here. I think this is a very powerful picture, and it says a lot. It has been rough. It has been a rough couple of years globally, to say the least. And I think many of us were very excited at the beginning of this school year to welcome our students back on campus and have a return to a consistent, semi-normal routine. But what we were finding is that it wasn't like just turning a switch back on. Our students needed a reacclimation period to get used to being around so many people and get used to being into a routine again. And a lot of our learners were coming to campus carrying a lot of stress and trauma, ill relatives, relatives who they may be lost over the past couple of years, various challenges with employment and finances. And so it's just been really hard for everybody. But all of this to say that we are now probably more than ever elevating student well-being on our campuses. Now, we know SEL was kind of growing in popularity before the pandemic, but now people are really, really interested in prioritizing student well-being, because we also know from research, which we'll talk about in a minute, that when we integrate SEL and prioritize student well-being into our day, we are not doing so at the expense of academics, because SEL and academic success go hand in hand. So what is SEL? I want to start out by creating this baseline understanding of what SEL is. There are a lot of different definitions of SEL. I chose this one for its simplicity. And this one I got from nu.edu, which is National University, I believe. But this one really talks about how it's a methodology to help students understand their emotions. And emotion is really at the root of SEL competencies. So we need to be able to identify and understand emotions, to be able to manage ourselves, to be able to have empathy for others, and to be able to just have a solid grounding in life and be able to create and manage goals in all sorts of different contexts. So SEL really is a framework around a lot of different skills and competencies that at their core have emotional understanding at the center. Let's talk about SEL competencies for a minute. Competencies, these are really a framework that was put forth by CASEL, which, let me get this right in case you don't know what CASEL is. I always mess this up, so here it is. Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning. That's what CASEL stands for. Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning. These are the competencies from their SEL framework. This is how they organize the skills of SEL. So let's talk about these and what they mean. You can go to the CASEL website and they have a lot of in-depth information about what these mean. We'll just sort of skim the surface today. The first competency is self-awareness, and that is being able to identify and understand one's own emotions, thoughts, and values. Self-management is the second competency, where now, in addition to being able to understand those thoughts and feelings, we're able to manage them appropriately. And then we move into self-awareness, or I'm sorry, social awareness, which is where we're now looking beyond ourselves and we are using those SEL or those emotional understandings to be able to relate to others. And then competency 4 is relationship skills, which is exactly what it sounds like, being able to show empathy and use that to build relationship and have healthy relationships. And then finally, competency 5, which is responsible decision making, being able to use all of those SEL skills and all of those relationships to make solid, healthy decisions about one's life and goals. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Lots more information at the CASEL website, which I'll put the link in the chat for that shortly. And this is the most frequently used framework and competencies, so these may be very familiar to you. We want to hear from you though. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll. We want to know what kind of SEL integration or implementation you have where you work. So I've just gone ahead and launched the poll. Go ahead and let me pause here, give everybody a minute to think about these answers. How does your school or district implement SEL? Oh, it's kind of all over the board. That's interesting.
I think, Liz, that's very representative of what we see when we go out and visit schools too. It just depends upon the district where SEL, or if SEL sits within the curriculum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let me go ahead and close this poll. So we can see that some of you have designated time, some of you have to integrate it into the content areas, and then some of you are not very sure if you even do anything deliberate at all. Yeah, I think you're right, Jill. I think that is pretty representative. All righty. All right, so thank you for sharing. I wanted to talk about and actually go back and talk about this research quickly. Remember earlier I said we're not going to prioritize student well-being and social emotional learning at the expense of academics. And that's because the research tells us that SEL has a powerful impact on academic learning. This 2017 meta-analysis, 97,000 students, K through high school, showed us that the academic performance of students who were exposed to SEL programs was 13 percentile points greater than that of their peers who were not exposed to SEL programs. And this was an average of 3.5 years after the initial program. So that in and of itself is very impressive. But beyond that, the study also showed that there was actually a decrease in behavior problems, drug use, and emotional distress as compared to the control groups. So this is a light bulb moment for me. We often think about teaching SEL as a trade-off, like do we elevate SEL or do we elevate academics? And we don't have to think of it that way, which is excellent. I love it. I think it's very uplifting to know I can tend to my students' well-being and teach SEL, and it's going to have such a positive impact on them just as a human being. And it's also going to allow for that academic growth to occur. So with that in mind, I want to tell you what Saddleback is bringing to the table for SEL and in terms of SEL resources. Some of you may be familiar with our SEL Tween Literacy Library, which came out a couple of years ago. Well, the Go SEL Literacy Library is again the tween version of that product, meant for students in grades 4 through 8. These are topic-based books to help tweens master social and emotional learning. So we're taking SEL skills and topics, and we created those books around those. We've organized these books into 2 different categories, if you will, looking within yourself and looking beyond yourself. Let me actually go back here. So these are paired fiction and nonfiction. On this slide, you can see we have 6 titles across the top that correspond to an SEL skill. And then along the bottom is the paired fiction title that goes with that SEL skill. These particular skills all fall into that category of looking within yourself, right? We see self-awareness there, we see self-management, we see moods and attitudes. These, if you're thinking about those SEL competencies and like the CASTLE framework, these would be those competencies that, or these skills that you might find in competencies 1 and 2, self-awareness and self-management. And then our other category of books are those skills that really relate to looking beyond yourself. We can see the skills here along the top row: social awareness, communicating effectively, problem solving. These are skills that we need to be able to adequately work with and communicate with others. So these are the social awareness, the relationship skills, those competencies 3, 4, and 5. And again, we tackle these skills with a nonfiction book, introducing the key aspects of what that skill is, what it looks like. And then we have a fiction title to go with it to sort of illustrate how that might look in a tween's life. Emotion is at the center of this library. We include 2 types of emotion vocabulary cards. One that is pictured here on the right will help the student learn the word and the definition. And the other one is the Emoti-card, which is really cool, helps to teach the students how to identify the emotion. So what does it look like when somebody is grateful? So again, this sort of loosely corresponds with looking within and looking beyond, right? What is my own understanding of what it means to be grateful? And then how can I identify that emotion when it's coming from somebody else? So this is a really great tool to have, and especially having it for older kids and done in a way that is not babyish, I think is really critical. So what makes this program unique? I think the paired fiction and nonfiction element is pretty unique, as is the focus on the emotion vocabulary words. We have 5 emotion vocabulary words for each topic with the 2 cards that we just showed you. And this, of course, is a Saddleback product. That means it is high-low, it is accessible. So the readability here is going to be at a 1.6 to a 1.9. So it's that high first grade readability. Again, true to Saddleback style, we have these real world images on every page. These are not childish illustrations, and look at them, they're gorgeous, they're bright, they're vibrant. And they feature tween characters. So it matches the target audience, and it does come with instructional support. Now, who is this designed for? This is a very flexible tool, as you'll see. You can use it in small counseling groups. It's also very useful for any student who needs reinforcement of a specific skill. Any student who can benefit from it, where you just like need to help the student communicate effectively, you can pull those books and you can work with the student on that particular skill. This is also very, very beneficial for students who are dual identified, who may have an IEP and also be considered an English learner. And again, it's targeted toward upper elementary to middle school students, and excellent because of the reading level and because of the emphasis on vocabulary or emotion vocabulary. It is also excellent for newcomers and beginner English learners. Let's take a quick look at the accessibility or the reading levels here. So if you're a Lexile person, the Lexile range for these books is a high-low 130 to 210. I always just prefer readability levels. They seem to make more sense to me. This is a 1.6 to a 1.9. And yet, these are not thin little baby books. We have the nonfiction page count at 64 pages, and the fiction books are at 48 pages. So these are not books that our upper elementary or our middle school kids are going to be, embarrassed to be seen with. These are good, hardy books to hold in your hand that were definitely designed specifically for students in grades 4 through 8.
Okay, so this is now quite an opportunity to kind of dive in and take a closer look. I just want to say I am so excited for all of you to see these books and this collection. As the author of some of the nonfiction books and the editor of the whole series, I can tell you you're in for a treat as you get into this box and really see what these books entail, as well as all of the support material, both in the cards and the instructional support. So Liz, let's take a closer look here. First at our nonfiction books. As Liz said, these are literally set up just as the competencies in CASEL are, with 1 and 2 being more about looking within yourself, but 5 is represented in that group too, with that decision making. And then looking beyond yourself being those competencies 3 and 4 with social awareness and relationship management from CASEL. But we also go even deeper into some other skills like communicating effectively and the values of kindness and respect. So you have, with these nonfiction books, 4 chapters each that delve deeper into each of these topics or competencies, and that really let students kind of explore how these particular topics play out in their everyday lives. And that's really what our nonfiction books are going to always be showing, is real tweens who are, as we discuss what each of these topics are, we get a sense of some different scenarios and things like that to help this reader understand what's going on. And within each of these nonfiction books, in addition to those full color photographs, we also have these emotion words that Liz brought up earlier. And you will see that word when it first appears in bold in the text. And it will also be accompanied in that nonfiction book by a definition with a text box that will allow students to see that definition right on the page.
Mm-hmm.
And then each of these books is accompanied with a paired fiction book. And these, I think, are just spectacular opportunities to explore what does that competency or that skill really look like when we are going through our day-to-day lives. And so we see scenarios that 4th through 8th graders will be very, very familiar with, and that also have quite a wide range. So you have everything from dealing with one's own emotions and the challenges of overcoming some of those emotions and self-doubts in order to succeed, to dealing with other people and having to negotiate relationships, and sometimes realizing that while you want to make relationships work where at all possible, there are also times when it's time to basically say that maybe a relationship isn't working. And all of those kinds of scenarios play out in these different stories. Our fiction books are about the story. So here you'll see again that the vocabulary, the emotion vocabulary, the first time it is used will show up in these fiction books. They will be another way to reinforce what has been taught in the nonfiction book, but they will not have a definition right on the page, because what we want in the fiction books is for the story to really draw readers in, for them to really get into that story element. So the words will have a glossary at the back, as they do in the nonfiction book, but in the fiction, that's where those definitions will be. We're going to see characters who are quite diverse in these fiction books, and that will be again on the emotion vocabulary cards. Liz mentioned earlier that the emotion vocabulary cards are about the what. What is it? What does it mean to be surprised? What does friendly mean? All of those kinds of words and definitions with a full color photograph. And since we have 5 words per topic, we have a total of 60 emotions, 60 cards. And then the other cards are our Emoti-cards. And these have illustrations. So you see here an illustration. These will also represent diverse backgrounds, both female and male illustrations. But we will see now what's happening on their face. What gestures are they making that are communicating to other people how they're feeling inside? And whenever I see these Emoti-cards, those of you who have heard me speak before know that my son has autism and is nonverbal. And many of the things that he struggles with are trying to understand what other people are feeling. That empathy, that understanding comes very much as a challenge to him. And these Emoti-cards are fantastic for helping to teach what to look for in order to get an understanding of how someone else is feeling, which is just such a critical part of successful relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And then the instructional support. As with all of our instructional support at Saddleback, you have a digital version included along with it, so that you can print out the quizzes and things like that. That comes right there as part of the instructional support guide. But what I love about the Go SEL instructional support is how deep it goes. So let's take a closer look, Liz. This overview chart at the beginning is the perfect chart for planning. This is where you can really see at a glance not only all of the books, but what their themes are. So if you already have some thematic lessons going, you can see, hey, what books in this series would literally fit with that. You also get to see the readabilities and word counts. And then as we get into also planning, we have all of our 60 emotions listed alphabetically, and which nonfiction book and which fiction book they are featured in. And then we get into our actual support elements for each of these topics. So you will see here not only a delve into the topic with suggested instructional resources and overviews for the teacher, but then lesson plans that specifically target not only whole class, but small group and partner activities. So we have different ways for students to work together as they learn these different topics. We have vocabulary activities that include role plays that we'll take a closer look at shortly. We have guided reading questions. So that question that came up at the beginning of where does this fit in my curriculum? This fits beautifully in a language arts or reading type of class, because you have not only the topics of the books that you can then talk through with SEL, but you also have the comprehension questions and the key elements of comprehension, and that's provided in our guided reading questions. And then we have a 2-page quiz for every topic that focuses both on comprehension and vocabulary. So here we take a look at that topic overview and background for the teacher. As I said, this is a pretty deep dive in for everyone, but I love one of the things that the author of this instructional support did was find a quote for every topic that is a rather famous quote, but also really applies to the topic. And it's a great way to kind of start thinking about what's happening. And then as the teacher, you have a great deal of information about what is this topic, what are some different outside resources that you could pull from, and what you get really good synopses of both the nonfiction and fiction book. And then that leads into the lesson plan. And the lesson plan is going to have several elements. The first is an introductory scenario. And that scenario is almost like another fiction story with this topic. It's not obviously as long as the book itself or as illustrated, but it's a unique scenario, fictional story that really provides kind of the kickoff into this particular topic. So you read that aloud, and then students have a chance to discuss it. And oftentimes what happens is that they get to the point of this topic very quickly through applying their thoughts about that scenario. And then as we go deeper, we have whole class, small group, and partner activities to, again, kick them off into this topic.
I really like, one of the things I like about the introductory scenario is that it provides an opportunity to practice listening skills as well, because it looks here, you know, the teacher, it's something that the teacher reads and the students listen, and then you generate conversation. So that is often actually a skill, particularly with our beginner English learners, that we need to make sure that we work in. And it's completely built in here for you with this mini read aloud for every book, right? So that's cool.
Correct.
Every
yeah,
topic.
Very true. Very true. And then as we get into vocabulary instruction, you mentioned the listening skills. Another key element, Liz, is really communication skills that we work on with students. And one of the elements of this vocabulary instruction are these emotion role plays. For every emotion, we have a very short little role play script created. And you can use these in a variety of ways. You could have 2 student volunteers come up and actually role play it out in front of the class, or you could have all students divided up into partners and have each partner group do role play each of the different emotions. You can have, just have, again, a great deal of flexibility, but the beauty of this is we are not only really getting a sense of, again, how these emotions play out, but students are getting a chance to learn some communication skills through the role plays. This is,
look, we're going to zoom in for you so you can see it.
I love these so much. So I love the fact that we've got a little zoom in here of 2 of the role plays. This happens to be for 2 very different emotions, anger and happy. And as you can see, the it's really generally just two who are involved in a role play. So it's a pretty easy thing to incorporate in and have students practice in a very quick, a lot of these can be done in less than a minute. When we talk about the role plays, we've already talked about that communication piece, but this is also a really good place for students to practice not only how to showcase emotions, but also how to react to those emotions. And you have an opportunity here to really kind of integrate all of the different elements. So we've had that Emoti-card that shows all of the different elements of what might happen in a person's face or what gestures they might use to show an emotion. And then when the student does the role play, they can actually practice some of those exact same gestures and facial changes to really kind of show, hey, am I really getting a chance to show emotions? This helps them then better read those emotions. So there's just a great deal of benefit that comes from incorporating the role plays.
I want to pause here to address this question that came in from Tatiana. She says, is the role play in the flash drive? So the role play is included in the teacher's guide. And this, yes, the teacher's guide is on the flash drive. So you would find it there. You would find it in the print teacher's guide that comes in the box, and you'd also find it on the flash drive. Okay.
And then we mentioned the comprehension aspect with these books. So you have guided reading questions for both the nonfiction and the fiction. But we also are constantly, I think one of the things we know when we're working with students, particularly students who may need high-low materials, who are striving to learn, that the more repetition, the more opportunities to circle back to something, the better. And so even in these comprehension questions, we make sure and call out those emotions that are highlighted in the book and explore them. So it's just another way to not only get some good solid reading comprehension in, but also to reiterate and reinforce those vocabulary words. And then the quiz, which is one of the things I love about this quiz is just all the different elements of it. You have the multiple choice that deals with comprehension about the topic and whether they've grasped the topic. You have an opportunity for a short answer question. And then you have matching for the vocabulary and the definitions. But look at that last activity, which is really goes to the heart of a lot of SEL, which is looking at this illustration and photo in miniature that were on the vocabulary cards and being able to now look at them and identify what emotion they are showing.
Mm-hmm. So we never want to leave you without talking a little bit, at least, about how we can implement something like this. Now, this is not going to be a deep dive implementation, but just some suggestions. And the key takeaway when thinking about implementation is that this library is extremely flexible. Mm-hmm. Yes, you absolutely can use it for whole class lessons. I think about addressing a particular emotion with the whole class and doing the role play. If you have a couple of students who really like to get up and perform and have the class figure out what's going on and what the emotion is, that's a great way to get the students engaged. This can also easily be guided lessons with small groups. Now, in this box, if you were to get the print, there would be 3 copies of every title, which is perfect for a nice small group guided reading session. Additionally, it's well set up for just small group, partner, or individual activities that may not necessarily be with a teacher sitting there. The students can easily work together on several of the activities that are included in the instructional support guide or the teacher's guide, as well as reading the books, because they are high-low, they are extremely accessible. So there are lots and lots of different things that you can do with these books. Jill, did you need to add anything to that?
You know, I think I'm noticing that Robert's asking some great questions, and I just want to mention that we will definitely be answering some of those questions at the end. But one of his points is, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time, Robert, because I see Mahabian. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but that communication model where you're talking about 7% of communication being verbal, 38% voice tone, and 55% body language or kinesthetics. That is so perfect for this particular SEL piece. And when we talk about the implementation, that's why we wanted role plays in there. That's why we wanted the different scenarios and all of the full color photographs, was to help students understand how much of SEL is nonverbal, is all about how it's communicated, what happens with the different with changes in ways that our expression is relayed, our gestures, our tone. All of those things are such much better real cues to how we're feeling than the words necessarily coming out of our mouth. So that's a great point.
And Robert, we're definitely going to get to your questions because you bring up some great points. So, okay. Now, actually, to go along with implementing the program and all of the different ways that you can use these books to structure different lessons and activities, we do want to mention that we have additional activities sold separately in a pack like this that you see on the left. And also you can purchase an audio support thumb drive as well. Now, Jill, can you tell us a little bit about these student activity worksheets and what's different about them versus what comes in the box?
Yes. So, one of the things when we just talked about how important this kind of nonverbal communication is to SEL, as a result, what we really focused on in the instructional support guide was that kind of interactivity that happens with all the different kinds of small group and partner and whole class activities that we suggest. But we also recognize that there's value in having students do some independent review work or even partnered review activities. And so the student activity worksheets are an available additional piece that you can purchase. And these are going to include some topic-centered activities that really delve into, for example, what is self-awareness or what is relationship management. You're going to see a lot of graphic organizers as students really kind of grasp with what that topic or competency is. You're going to see 2 activities that are focused on those emotion vocabulary words again, and different ways to practice learning those vocabulary words. And then you have, for comprehension's sake, a nonfiction book activity and a fiction book activity. So you get 6 additional activity sheets for every single topic.
That's great. Again, very flexible, lots of different angles, right? You have the books, which are a great, literacy tool in and of themselves. So you can get the nonfiction and fiction book activities for more like reading comprehension oriented things. But then we also have the option of focusing on the topic or honing in on the emotion vocabulary. So it's whatever your students need the most emphasis on, there's something included with this library or in this student activity kit that's sold separately. Now let's talk audio support. So we do have an audio thumb drive that is sold separately, and this includes audio for all of the books, all 24 books, and the narrators are, I would describe them as being highly engaging, lots of personality to their voices, both male and female, and it's a really great tool to have to help students improve their pronunciation and their fluency. And so I know a lot of teachers like to have this if they do some sort of like station or small group model. They like to have this so students can listen to the book as sort of a listening station, if you will, or listening to it before coming to the teacher to practice reading and pronouncing the words. So this adds another layer of support for you.
Yeah, it's great for modeling. and really helping students, especially students who are English learners or who are just learning to read, having that supportive narrator who is pronouncing those words for them, and then they can read along or listen a couple of times before they then do some of the reading themselves. It's a great piece of support.
Well, we don't want to leave you without offering a specific activity that you can do with these books. And we chose paired reading as our strategy to offer as an example of something you can do with this book. Jill, can you tell us about this, and why did we pick paired reading, and how does it work?
Well, first of all, I am an absolute promoter of paired reading. I used it in my own classroom very frequently, and I have seen it used successfully by many, many of the teachers that I have conducted professional developments with. And one of the strategies that works best with this is a little different than what even as we see here in this photo. This photo kind of shows what a lot of us think of when we think of paired reading. Oh, they're sitting side by side. And that works fine as paired reading. But I like it even better when each student has their own copy of the book and they sit face to face, essentially across from each other. It's almost like what I would call paired reading pods. What's beautiful about having students facing each other is that as they are doing their paired reading, they really it becomes them hearing each other, and their bodies actually become little sound barriers to their reading out loud. So it actually helps the classroom as a whole stay more focused too. But in this situation, each student having their own book, they decide are they going to read it paragraph by paragraph or page by page? They divide up that text. One will read and then the next will read. But what is also beautiful about paired reading, when we talk about our striving readers, our English learners, we are going to have some students who are going to need that little extra support. And so when you are in a paired reading pod, it can easily move to choral reading where they're reading together, and when it's needed for somebody that may be not kind of stumbling over the words and not quite sure, then there can easily be their partner come in and then they read a little bit together, and then maybe they break apart again and each one takes turns as they're comfortable. The other thing that is important when you are doing paired reading is to make sure that that pair has accountability together. So you want to make sure that they have some sort of comprehension activity that they can do together. Those of you who have our hands-on reading comprehension activities book know we have a lot of different hands-on ideas for how students who are, for example, in a paired reading situation, a hands-on kind of comprehension activity that they could do together after they finish their reading. It could also be an activity sheet, like those student activity sheets that we showed earlier that are available separately. But whatever it is, you want to make sure that that pair not only has time to read, but also has an accountability piece to really show their comprehension of what they read. And I want to point out that the big box comes with 3 copies of every book. So you have an absolute easy accessibility to do things like paired reading or small group reading. But some of you may want additional books for even slightly larger groups. So you can purchase the small box, which is 1 copy of each title. And for those of you that want to do even more with the vocabulary cards, you get in the big box 1 box of emotion vocabulary cards and 1 box of Emoti-cards, but you can also order additional boxes of these vocabulary and Emoti-cards separately.
I did want to mention that this library is available on our digital platform as well. So if you would prefer to have your students access these books digitally, that is an option. We aren't limiting you to just print. So we'd be happy to give you information about licensing and what that looks like and how that works. You just can reach out to us for that. So we're going to get to questions in just a moment, but I want to let everybody know who is coming up on our webinar series next week. We have Jody Nolf and Carly Spina. They are pairing up and they are going to give us a wonderful session on collaborating. So this is perfect for teachers who need to collaborate with push-in teachers or collaborative teachers, if you will, to meet the needs of multilingual learners. Oftentimes, we don't have the time or the space to really figure out how to best work with one another in our buildings to ensure that the students are getting what they need. So Jody and Carly are going to come together and share lots of great tips and strategies for making sure that we are working with the other professionals in our building to make sure that student needs are met. So this will be next week, Thursday at 12 o'clock Pacific or 3 o'clock Eastern, and you can register on our website, and we will be sending an email out as well. We hope you enjoyed learning about our new Go SEL Literacy Library. Let's talk about Robert's questions before we leave. Oh, Tatiana is excited about Jody and Carly. I am too. I think that's going to be a really great session.
Oh,
Okay.
and Liz, I want to make sure everybody knows that after our questions and answers, we are going to have a drawing for a free set of books. So please
I did
stick
forget
around
to
for that.
mention that at the beginning. Yes, stick around. We will be giving away a set of these great SEL books for you. So Robert had mentioned in the Q&A area about using sentence stems or sensory support or graphic organizers or the QSSA, all of these things for social emotional learning. And my answer to that is yes, yes, and yes. All of those things that you are talking about are instructional strategies that are useful for simultaneously increasing language acquisition and understanding content. So all of these tools that you mentioned are absolutely relevant when we are addressing SEL as it is embedded into a content area. So for example, with the QSSA, where we pose a question to students, give them some think time, give them a sentence stem to help them actually answer that question in a complete sentence. And it's also a language scaffold. Give them time to talk to a partner, and then they share out. Think of all the SEL that's happening there, right? So they have to understand and manage their emotions about being asked a question that they will be held accountable for answering using this QSSA frame. They are given the supports they need. Then they have to work with a partner to come up with an answer and communicate their answer. So all of those things play in to SEL when you are, and you don't necessarily have to be teaching with SEL books like these. You can be teaching any content, and those skills for interacting with one another come into play. And so those supports are 100% necessary and effective. And I'm so glad that you actually named them for us, Robert. The other thing you mentioned is, I think you meant to type in RAFT, which I believe is a writing framework. I'm not super familiar with it, but if I'm understanding correctly, it is it's a framework for composition for writing that involves something about the role versus audience. So even that, there is at its foundation the need to understand roles and understanding other people's motivations. There it is. Thank you. Role, audience, format, and topic. Who's your audience, right? Writing to address your audience. What's the role of the writer? What's the topic? Making sure that we're addressing what the audience needs to know. All of that incorporates elements of SEL. Wouldn't you agree, Jill?
Yes, absolutely. You know, when we talk about writing, what, you know, when we a lot of times when we're working with students and writing, the first thing that you can write about is yourself, right? And your own experiences and those kinds of journal writings and things. And SEL goes to the heart of that because it's really about again, identifying my own emotions and then dealing with them and then starting to recognize how I interact with others. So writing is easily fits within this. Whenever you have good, solid stories like you have here and good, solid content, it's just so easy to integrate reading and writing because students are going to want to talk about these books, but they're also then going to want to write about these books.
Thank you so much for your questions. If there are any other questions, we still have a couple of minutes. You can go ahead and drop those in the chat or the Q&A area. But I want to talk about who our free book winner is. So thank you for attending and thank you for your engagement, everybody, today. But our winner is Tatiana. So we will be reaching out to you to find out a good place to ship these books. And Tatiana, let me get your last name. So just make sure we don't have two Tatianas on here. Mesa. So Tatiana Mesa, thank you for joining us. And thank you for everybody attending today and spending your time with us. Yes way, Tatiana, it's you. You're the winner. You're the winner today. We're going to email you using the email address that you provided on your registration. And we'll find out where you want your new Go SEL Tween Literacy Library shipped. So this is where you can find Saddleback on social media. Whatever your favorite social media platform is, we are there. So find us, like us, and follow us, pretty please. And thank you for all that you do. And thanks for joining us today. Thank you to Jill for taking time out of her schedule to share with us. And we will see everybody next week for our session with Carly and Jody. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.